Hi guys, welcome back to the Korg studio. I'm Rich Formidoni, and today we're going to talk about sampling on the M3 Music Workstation. Sampling is a huge and very important part of this instrument, so let's jump in and I'll show you how it works. The M3's open sampling system is actually available in all three of the operational modes of the M3. So down here on the bottom of the screen there is a sampling/audio in tab. Touch that and you have access to some of the sampler's parameters. Now the cool thing is, if you switch from combi mode to program mode to sequence mode, you can see that that tab is still there in every one of those modes. So you can sample no matter what you're doing on the M3. Now right over here are the controls that you'll use for the sampler. Right above the sequencer controls are sampling record and sampling start-stop. These are the buttons that you'll use to arm and start and stop the sampler. Now let's dig into this sampling/audio in tab just a little bit more. This is actually the same display that you'll see if you switch to sampling mode and go to the audio in/setup tab. So either way, you're looking at pretty much the same exact controls. Now up top here, this area is grayed out, and that's because we've selected to use the global settings. Let's uncheck that temporarily, and now we can modify what's happening with the two inputs, the two analog inputs on the back of the M3, input 1 and 2. Now if we were to jump to global mode and set these up the way we want, we could have that set permanently, so they'll always have the same settings no matter what you're doing. So right from here you can adjust the input level, the panning, the bus select of the inputs, and what that means is after it comes in, you can send it to different locations. You can send it to the left-right outputs, any of the effect slots, or the individual outputs. Now above and beyond that, there are also effect buses, so you can have these inputs controlling effects such as vocoders. And beyond that, there are auxiliary buses, so you can set to 1, 2, 3, and 4 or stereo pairs of these auxiliary buses, and that gets very useful when you're doing some complex routing. And again, these send 1 and 2 fields are so you can send the inputs directly to the master effects. Now, looking down here, we see sampling setup. This is where you choose where the sound is coming from. So right now, the sampler is listening to the left and right outputs of the M3. So that's resampling. It's sampling its own sound. Now, if I push the sampling record button, these options get grayed out, and now I can actually hear sounds and see the meters reacting to the sound that's coming into the M3, or in this case, emanating from it. So I'll press the sampling record button again and disarm the sampler. Now if I was to switch this, you can see all the different places you can record. So I could record from the analog inputs, the digital inputs, the FireWire if you have the optional EXB FW board installed, and here we've got left and right selected, or the auxiliary buses and individual outs. So the beautiful thing about those auxiliary buses is you could route the input to the effects by using this auxiliary bus setting, and then from the effects page you could route it back to the sampler. So you can sample with the effects and then free up the effects to do something else. Now this field right here is trigger. This is what actually starts the sampler recording. So let's examine the options here. The first one you have is sampling start switch. So that means when you press the start stop button, the sampling start stop button, it will start recording right then. Note on means that it will actually start recording when you press a note on the M3. Now just below that, you can select to save to the M3's RAM, or if you have some USB media, either a flash drive or a USB hard drive plugged in, you can select media right there. And you can choose stereo or recording an individual channel. And these two fields down here will show you your sampling time. Now, there's a very useful shortcut here. Let's touch the drop-down menu and select Auto Sampling Setup. What these are basically templates that will set up the sampler to do specific things. So initialize, it just sort of resets all the parameters at once. Resample program play, you can actually touch OK here and see that it's set itself up to resample the M3. Or you can select a different option, record audio input. And right there it starts, it's set up to record from the auxiliary inputs. And it's already routed it to the auxiliary buses, so you could conceivably run it through the effects. So that's very cool. Now let's jump over to sequence mode, and we've got a couple more options to play with for the trigger. So for example, here I could select the sequencer start switch instead of the sampling start switch. Or, and this is really useful, threshold. So here I can dial in a specific threshold. So once the M3 hears a certain volume, it will start sampling. You can see a little arrow right there telling you where that level is. And you can raise and lower it just by moving the value slider or turning the dial. So I'm going to jump back to program mode and go to the main tab, and here I've got a funk kit. Now what I'm going to do is resample this funk kit. So I'm going to turn on Karma, press the sampling record and start stop buttons, and then press a key. And to stop it, I just press the sampling start stop button one more time. Let's jump over to sampling mode. So I physically changed to sampling mode there, and I'm going to go to the recording tab. We've already made the sample. We're ready to play with it now. So let's look at this field right here, sample. Here we can actually choose all the different samples that we've recorded since the M3 was turned on. And the latest one, the last one in the list, will be the one you were playing with. So if we zoom out a little bit, by hitting the first pad, you can hear your sample. So let's say you wanted to play with that sample a little bit, do some editing. Press the page select button, and what we're going to do is touch sample edit. Now right from here you can actually see the waveform, and if you want to modify a different sample you can select it right from this list, just like you can on the main page of sampling mode. Now you can still play the sample here, and you can also select a range. So this is going to be the portion of the sample that you're going to edit. So for example, let's move the start point up a little bit and move the end point just beyond the start point. Now, sampling start plays edit range. That means if I press the sampling start stop button, it's going to play just that little chunk. So now that we've selected a specific chunk, let's touch the drop-down menu and see what kind of tools we have available to us. Here's some options that let you modify the sample as a whole, but if you scroll over a little bit, you see some cut, copy, paste, insert, mix, things that'll help you modify just that single chunk that you've selected. Now on the bottom here you see use 0. What that means is that when you're selecting an edit range, either the start or the end point, it'll automatically move the edit point to a spot where the wave crosses the 0 line. So that means all of your edits will come out smooth instead of suddenly popping or clicking. Now you might notice there's a piano keyboard up here. This is because we're actually working with only one key or one range of keys at the moment. So if I switch to a different number in the index, change from 1 to 2, I could select a different sample to be used on this particular key, and you'll notice a different key is in focus. So you can specify different keys or ranges of keys, and all of that is part of one multi-sample. But that's another tutorial for another time. There are tons of different places that we can go in this sampler. There's a lot to do. So don't forget, when you're finished your work, go to media mode and save to USB media. So next time you turn on the M3, you can get to your samples right away. As usual, we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more you can do with the M3 sampler. So stay tuned for a few more sampling tutorials, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.